Check, check, 1, 2. Hey, 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 hey. One, two, 1, 2. Check, check, 1, 2. Hold on. Check, check. Hey, hey, 1, 2. Check, 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 check. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. Hey, hey. Check, check. Hey, hey, 1, 2. 1, 2. One, two. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, hey. Yep. So podium should be muted.
Good morning. Look at your bright, shining faces. Good morning. Hello. Hopefully you've had as much coffee or juice as you could possibly handle. We're really trying to fill you up on liquids before we get you some breakfast, but I have been told breakfast is coming. Oh, yes. Good morning. I'm Jana Shortle. You may know me from my job at Care 11, or you have, oh, Mr. Carter. Thank you for starting that round of applause, Mayor Carter. I really appreciate it. Feel free to do that at any time. Thank you for having me again this year. I was here last year, and so I grew up in a very rural area, nowhere near Minnesota, and we didn't have debate teams. I had no idea what I was getting into last year, and I was absolutely so blown away that the minute I left here, I went to work, and I was like, you guys, they have this thing called the Urban Debate League, and kids talk about hard topics and like civil discourse. And they don't yell at each other or call each other names or tag each other on Twitter. Everybody there is like, we're aware of what debate is. I'm like, okay, cool. Do you also know you can get these toaster pastries? You put them in a toaster and they pop out. And I'm telling you, growing up in the middle of nowhere, you're just constantly surprised by cool things. So thank you for allowing me to nerd out last year and probably in the next hour this year as well. I appreciate it. I want to welcome everyone here to Augsburg University. It's going to be pretty exciting. It's a tough topic for the young people today of the Minneapolis and St. Paul Public Schools. This is the 7th annual Mayor's Challenge Great Debate. And as we introduce people and get started, feel free, of course, to enjoy your drinks and breakfast. And before we introduce our VIP panel of judges and students, we want to thank everyone who has made this event possible, including the event sponsors, our VIP sponsor, Intenza Law Firm, Briggs & Morgan, and Excel Energy, our Changemaker sponsors, Nyland Johnson Lewis, Park State Bank, Winthrop & Weinstein, our leadership sponsors, Brassford Ramil, Berger & Montague, Cargill, Dorsey & Whitney, Great Plant Moody, Hogan Adams, Lockridge Grindell Newen, Mortensen Construction, Solemn Risk Partners, Thunheim, Zimmerman, and Reed. Also, if I mispronounce your name or your corporation, yeah, you should have hired Julie Nelson. Sorry. It's like, it's early. We are also really grateful to the table sponsors. They're listed in your program. And we're especially grateful to First Lady Gwen Walls, who in addition to being a former educator, is also a former speech and debate coach for hosting the governor's table. With her leadership, she will help us advocate for more academic debate in the state of Minnesota. So please join me in thanking the businesses, the firms, and individuals who have made all of this possible. A huge thank you to the members of the Minneapolis and St. Paul Public School Districts, both district officials and the board. We are extremely grateful for your investment, support, and partnership in this important work. And now to introduce our program participants and hear a little bit more about this topic. This morning, the students will present a debate on immigration reform. This has been the national topic for students from Los Angeles, New York City over this school year. There is broad acceptance, regardless of political perspective, that our immigration system in this country is broken. The students will present an informative debate about 2 different reform possibilities and ask all of us to choose which argument is more persuasive. So, would the students and judges please come to the stage? And already we have bridged a gap. The mayors from both cities welcomed all students, no matter which city they're from. Thank you for that lesson in civility and open arms. Always appreciate it, gentlemen. All right, for the debate, advocating on the affirmative that we should substantially reduce border restrictions and increase immigration are Amanda Bloom and Simon Jarkko. Haley Hine and Sandy Bolton will advocate for reforms to the immigration, but will detail the economic and ethical issues of an open border. These are your students. Amanda Bloom, a senior at Central High School. Between what she learned on philosophy and government and the incredible friends she's made along the way, she thoroughly enjoyed debating this year. She will be attending the University of Michigan in the fall. Simon Jarkko is a rising senior at Washburn High School in South Minneapolis. The thing he loves most about debate is the community. Simon has been a member of the Washburn debate team since freshman year and a coach for Field Community Middle School for the past 2 years. Sandy Bolton is a junior at Roosevelt High School. She's been in debate for 6 years and counting and has been the student coach at Keewatin Middle School for 2 years. She stays in debate because of a love of talking about what she's passionate about and her community. Haley Hine is a senior at Central High School. What she enjoys most about debate is how much it has taught her about important social issues, like education and immigration. Next year, she will continue her interest for politics at Macalester College in St. Paul. Hello, judges. Looking judgy this morning. Nice and judgmental when you rolled out of bed. Super, it's 2019, that works out. You just go on my Twitter account if you want to judge me. It's fun. Hashtag judge me. Anyway, let's begin by welcoming our judges. Amy Berquist, our content expert VIP judge. Amy is a senior staff attorney at the Advocates for Human Rights, where she works for the International Justice Program. Before becoming an attorney, she worked for 11 years at Minneapolis South High School, where she taught social studies and Russian and coached debate and speech. After graduating from the University of Minnesota Law School, she clerked for 3 federal judges, the Honorable John R. Thunheim, the Honorable William A. Fletcher, and, this one might sound familiar, Associate Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Mr. Melvin Carter is a 4th-generation St. Paul resident, St. Paul Public School graduate, former St. Paul City Council member, father, and St. Paul's mayor. Mayor Carter has been working to engage, enfranchise, and uplift people, not only in St. Paul, but across the state and nation. Most recently, he served as executive director of the Minnesota Children's Cabinet, advising Governor Mark Dayton on early childhood policy. Prior to joining state government, Carter represented Ward 1 on the St. Paul City Council from 2008 to 2013. Everyone welcome Mayor Carter. Mr. Jacob Fry is the 48th mayor of Minneapolis, a former Minneapolis City Council member, a civil rights attorney, an advocate for social justice, and a proud resident of the greatest city in America. Congratulations, Mayor Carter. It's okay. Yeah, it's gonna be fine. Why are you sitting next to each other? That's a terrible idea. While practicing employment and civil rights law at Faegre and Benson, now Faegre Baker Daniels, Mayor Fry became an active community organizer. In 2013, he successfully ran for city council in the 3rd Ward of Minneapolis with a platform that championed constituent services, increasing residential growth, growing the number and variety of small and local businesses, getting affordable housing fully funded, and helping open a new community-based school to serve the growing number of families living near the Central Riverfront. Welcome to Mayor J. Fry. John Marshall is back. He works for Xcel Energy as the Director of Community Relations. His team manages the strategic relationships
within the nearly 400 Minnesota communities served by Xcel Energy, playing a critical role in areas of operations, energy policy, emergency response, economic development, and business retention and expansion. John has more than 17 years of professional experience working with business, community, and political leaders. He is currently the board chair for the St. Paul Serves Foundation and co-founder of Serving Our Troops. The Minneapolis-St. Paul Business Journal named him one of 40 under 40 for his professional and volunteer leadership. Welcome, John Marshall. Our last judge rounding out the VIP panel is Liz Brahma or Brahma? Brahma. See? Third time I'll get it right. Told you, Julie Nelson. Liz is an attorney with Briggs & Morgan, as well as vice president of the firm and a member of the board of directors and executive committee. She also serves as co-chair of the firm's litigation department. She is the former chair and a current member of the firm's energy law section, a member of the business litigation section, and is a CPA. Dang, girl. She also rides a bike. Liz focuses on complex contested matters for energy companies and has successfully resolved financial disputes ranging from multi-million-dollar acquisition matters to complex regulatory rate proceedings. She is admitted to practice in Minnesota, Colorado, North Dakota, and Wisconsin, as well as multiple federal courts. Liz is also, no shock, a former high school debater. Students. We make the intros excessively long to be like, okay, let's go. So you forget why you're here and all sorts of things. Is it working? Need some coffee? You good? All right. Well, then you're going to debate. You ready to do it? Let's do it.
The U.S. is in the midst of an immigration crisis. The current administration is constantly tightening already dangerously restrictive border and visa policies, which endangers immigrants and threatens the future of America. Meanwhile, more and more people attempt to enter the United States to follow their dreams. The status quo promises the mass exploitation of documented and undocumented workers alike, along with threatening the unstable economic growth of America. To address this problem, my partner Amanda and I believe that the United States should reduce restrictions on legal immigration by opening its borders and eliminating numerical caps and quotas on immigration. We have two main reasons for doing so. First, it would benefit the economy, and second, it is the morally required course of action. I know it's only 8 a.m., but we have to talk about the economy. I hate to break it to you folks, but the U.S. is on the verge of a recession right now. Don't just take it from me. Paul Davidson, an economist and reporter for USA Today, writes that over half of economists surveyed by the National Association of Business and Economics in 2018 are predicting a significant recession by 2020. Another recession would tear open the scars that individuals, families, and communities have spent over 10 years healing from since the 2008 financial collapse. Opening borders would stave off this coming recession for one reason: skill allocation. Immigration restrictions result in wasted labor potential. High and low-skilled immigrants alike are deterred from working in the U.S. because of quotas and wait times on visas and green cards. I just finished my econ course, so it's still fresh in my mind, but I know it might have been a while for you, so here's a quick refresher. Supply and demand. Borders cut off the potential for high-skilled workers to get high-skilled jobs. That means that gaps in the workforce never get filled while unemployment stays high and economic growth stays low. Right now, the status of undocumented and guest workers in the U.S. is precarious and sometimes violent. Richard Eskow, a senior advisor for health and economic justice at the Huffington Post, writes that guest workers often work 25-hour shifts without overtime and 80-hour work weeks. Immigrant workers are often threatened with deportation or detention as a result of reporting this exploitation. Under open borders, there are no threats of deportation. Every worker has access to legal recourse, which ensures that labor protection policies like minimum wage, safety regulation, and overtime policies are effective. If immigrant workers and their families are already working and living in the United States, opening borders is only a question of if these individuals have their basic needs met. Beyond the pure economic benefits of opening borders, borders also represent an ethical dilemma with violent consequences. And I'd like to talk about this as our second main point. The vast majority of violence that immigrants face is a direct result of border policy. Family separation, deportation, and detention are all violent practices that are perpetuated by security agencies like DHS and ICE. Immigration regulation directly impedes upon an individual's ability to access opportunities and services that might not be available in their home country. Additionally, individuals searching for greater opportunities are subjected to violence at the border for even trying to seek a better life in America. In conclusion, immigrant workers and their families are going to cross the US border regardless of legality. Open borders ensures that they can effectively contribute to the national economy while being protected from corporate exploitation and state violence. I'm open for process.
Okay, so my first question is about your proposal itself. What does open borders look like? Are you giving anyone who wants a visa, or are you getting rid of the visa program as a whole? What does it look like?
Yeah, so we think that the visa program wouldn't exist anymore. Essentially, someone trying to enter the U.S. would either at a legal port of entry would apply to enter the country, and then if their application was accepted, they would be able to enter the United States.
Okay, so you're just letting anyone in? Like, you're letting in white supremacists, terrorists, criminals?
No, obviously there's like a screening process, right? So we would check the database of the country that they were coming from any red flags, any criminal records, stuff like that, and they would be declined, obviously, if there were any red flags.
Oh, good. So there's still background checks at the border. So there's a potential for backlogs that inhibit people's ability to enter the U.S.?
I mean, we think that the backlogs would be massively reduced because the whole process is streamlined, right? Like there's so many sub-points on every visa category that people have to meet, and that's more for like USCIS to sort through.
Okay, so on the economic benefits, you say that roughly half of economists agree that there will be a recession in 2020. What do the other 50% say?
Well, when have 100% of economists ever agreed on anything, ever?
Sure. So, if I understand you correctly, everyone who's not a criminal can enter the U.S. That must be millions, if not billions, of people in a short amount of time, yeah?
Sure.
Okay, with such a large influx of people, will the U.S. be able to prevent issues like drug trafficking and human trafficking?
Yeah, we totally think so. We think that so many resources are going into border security and restrictions right now that if we just divert most of those resources to stopping the actual crime at the border, we can deter those people from coming to the United States and stop them.
Oh, good. So there's still a screening process to get into the United States. Can you explain to me how this screening process is different from the screening process that racially profiles people at the border?
Yeah, so we would argue that all of those, like that violence is built into the legality of immigration, right? So if we change the structures and the wording around things like visas, we will be able to admit people in a fairer way.
Okay, that's all I have.
While our opponents frame an open borders policy as a utopia, they vastly overstate the benefits of the plan. First, we will discuss how an open borders plan would depress wages and stifle the economy due to an influx in the labor pool. Second, we will show how even if open borders benefited the economy, there are massive disparities between immigrants and non-immigrant households. Lastly, we will prove that the American dream that immigrants should be so lucky to have is just a facade for a cycle of oppression that would be fueled by open borders. First, I'll start with the economy. Since they want to talk about simple supply and demand, let's talk about wages. If there is an increase in the supply of labor in the market, the value of each individual laborer will go down because there will be less relative demand. Simple, right? Our opponents talk the talk in regards to economic benefits, but can they really walk the walk? They talk a big game about how immigration will lead to economic prosperity, but don't acknowledge the fact that an increase in immigration will hurt not only immigrants, but also current workers in America. George Borjas, an economist who has studied the ways immigration affects the economy for decades, says that just a 10% increase in the labor pool would depress wages by 3%. Now this might not sound like much, but when you're trying to support a family on $40,000 per year, a 3% or $1,200 decrease is a huge loss. And we're not talking about a billionaire missing out on his third yacht. We're talking about a working class family not being able to pay their bills. This will, in turn, hurt the economy because with lower spending on goods and services, it will slow the economy and growth and production. Secondly, any economic benefits that are had won't be felt by immigrants. There's a significant wage gap between American citizens and immigrants. In Minnesota, there's an income difference of $14,000 between immigrant households and non-immigrant households. And that's not even the largest in the country. This difference proves that equal access to opportunity our opponents are preaching is a myth. In addition to this, according to the Center for Immigration Studies, among immigrants with a college degree, 20% work low-skilled jobs, while just 7% of native-born workers with a college degree do. Finally, they talk about how violence stems from borders, when in reality it stems from historical institutions that promote oppression. Immigrants face discrimination on the basis of race, religion, and flat-out xenophobia every single day. According to Cecilia Aon, an associate professor at Arizona State University, discrimination has lasting economic, social, and health effects on families. This is apparent in hostile social interactions that lead to emotional stress, social isolation, and limited financial opportunities. We need to work on our economy, on our country's prejudices before subjecting even more people to the hate our country gives people who are different. And an open borders policy can't solve these issues. In conclusion, we need to prioritize reducing current inequalities immigrants face at work and in their communities, and we need to sustain economic growth rather than stifle it with a surplus of new labor. Our plan will be a catastrophe for our country, and I hope you can see past the allure of open borders to see that it will have lasting consequences for this country and the immigrants it seeks to help. I'm looking for process.
All right, you say that we vastly overstate the benefits of our plan, but isn't any benefit at all a good thing?
I mean, yes, however, under this plan there will be no benefits. The economy will be worse off than it was before, and immigrants will be worse off than they were before. There's only a net detriment of the plan.
Okay, but in America, there's already a lot of immigrants today. This so-called wage suppression, have we seen it so far?
Actually, Amanda, yes, we have. George Borjas's research that he got the 10% increase, 3% decrease is based off of immigration influxes in the 70s and early 20th century.
Okay, why prioritize that over our border situation? Shouldn't we at least give people a choice?
We have proved that hostile social interactions with immigrants and current citizens lead to lasting social and economic detriments to those immigrants. And it's important that we break that cycle of violence before allowing more people to be subjected to that violence.
Okay. So how would you fix that without opening the border?
We need to reform the system that allows for this sort of prejudice and discrimination. And before we can do any sort of open borders plan, we need to have reformed that system.
Okay, but wouldn't you consider our border one of these historical institutions that causes this violence?
I think that the borders are a route for people to be discriminated by. However, the borders themselves do not pose the greatest threat to equality and no discrimination. The real threat is that, this institutional racism that occurs. And while that is somewhat helped by borders, dissolving borders won't help. It'll only hurt immigrants because we haven't adjusted our worldview.
Okay. That's all.
All right.
Our first speech focused on two core arguments: the effects of immigration in the U.S. and why opening our borders is the only ethical solution to the U.S. immigration crisis, from solving for exploitation in the workplace to violence at the border. These two factors will be the key decision makers in this debate. Let's talk about the first one first, the U.S. economy. As 2020 brings the potential to enter a recession, the negative argues that any economic benefit of immigration won't be felt by those who need it most. It will all go to the upper class. This, however, could only be true in the short term, as Simon clearly explained in our first speech. Freeing the movement of people ultimately leads to long-term development, leads to more effective market regulation, and prevents abuses of power. We aren't stifling the economy at all. In fact, we're ensuring that the growth we have is long-term and stable. This is crucial for the recovery from the recession that will happen. The negative also claim that our open borders plan will suppress wages, but they're making a claim based on the assumption that the size of the US economy is fixed. We can't support any more workers, they say, but with an influx of immigration, as the US economy grows, we're going to need more workers to fill key positions. That drives wages up, or at least maintains them where they are now. In fact, Haley, we can walk the walk. Most importantly, we want to talk about the growth this growth we're talking about. It also benefits the immigrants themselves. An open borders plan protects especially undocumented workers. According to the Berkeley Review of Latin Studies 2013, acquiring legal status increases wages by 5 to 15%. Our plan introduces a baseline of fair labor practices for all. So on the off chance that there isn't a recession in 2020, our policies still make sense. Next, let's talk about our second topic, what we can do to help immigrants outside of the workplace. I'd like to talk about how in Trump's America today, restrictive border controls tend to increase xenophobic and nationalist behavior, according to Dr. Jones at the University of Hawaii. Laws don't only exist for politicians, they send a message to individuals as well. In our current situation, it's as if the government has hung up a big neon sign that says, we don't really care about these issues. Before we do anything else, we need to take down that sign. While it isn't our job to change the mindset of every single American, we can suppress the rise of nationalist rhetoric towards immigrants, in part by changing our immigration policies. We can't claim that this country can offer the perfect American dream, but it is our duty to try and do our best to make it better. The root cause of today's immigration issues lies with our border laws. We need to fix those first, not try to work within our current broken system.
Our opponents have given several reasons why open borders seems like a good idea. However, the benefits of their proposal are vastly overstated. First, I will go more in depth into how their economic benefits are not so beneficial. Second, I will explain how opening the borders is a band-aid solution to a broader issue of xenophobia and racism. I'd first like to talk about the supposed economic benefits of opening the border. We have to consider how a large influx of people will affect our economy. You want to talk simple economics, Miss Supply and Demanda? Well, as the supply of immigrant workers goes up, the demand for labor goes down, and as a result, bosses are incentivized to pay workers less. We've already proven that as the population increases by 10%, wages go down by 3%. This trend doesn't just affect immigrants, it affects all working Americans. And even if wages increase for immigrants after legal status in the short term, that still doesn't stop a wage depression for all residents in the long term. And it affects the whole economy too. As wages go down, the ability to purchase goods and services goes down too, which slows economic growth and makes their recession inevitable. Yikes. Simon says that immigrants already face unfair wages, but newsflash, opening the border doesn't actually fix that problem. The real solution is to reform the economic system to reduce the exploitation that affects immigrants and Americans, not opening the border. The affirmative claims that immigrants will be able to occupy high-skilled jobs. This may be true in a perfect world where xenophobia and racism don't affect the job market, but the unfortunate truth is that many stereotypes inhibit immigrants' ability to use their full potential. We've already proven that a whopping 20% of immigrants with a college education occupy low-skilled jobs. Now I'd like to talk about how immigrants won't even experience the economic benefits of open borders. Haley's already eloquently explained that there is a significant wage gap between immigrant households and American households. In Minnesota, there is a difference of $14,000 a year. That is how much Haley's used Prius costed. We have to prioritize mending this wage gap before opening the border. This problem, along with the exploitation we've talked about in the first negative speech, just makes the American dream an American nightmare. Finally, the affirmative tries to claim that they get rid of violence against immigrants. However, they don't consider the violence immigrants will face once they get into the country. This oppression that the affirmative just can't fix manifests in two distinct ways: physical violence and structural violence. First, physical violence. In this political climate, this country is not safe for immigrants, particularly immigrants of color. According to San Francisco journalist Sarah Robiney, California has seen a 17% increase in hate crimes against immigrants in the past year. The affirmative does nothing to protect immigrants against the violence once they enter the United States. Second, structural violence. Even if you open the border, immigrants still won't have access to the ability to protect themselves against discrimination due to barriers like language and money. In conclusion, the economic benefits of our opponent's proposal is vastly overstated, and the negative impacts of the plan outweigh any benefits. Instead of a band-aid solution to a problem of inequality, we as a nation should focus on fixing the conditions in the United States to be fair and equitable for all.
The negative rebuttal was rhetorically powerful on the shortfalls of the American dream. However, we don't need to win that America is a perfect utopia to prove that opening borders is a good idea. Immigrant workers and families want to enter the US right now. Opening borders gives them the choice to freely immigrate and obtain residence in America. They say that immigration has adverse effects on wages. We'll answer this with two warrants. First, there's a worker shortage right now, especially of low-skilled workers. That provides a buffer to any influx of working-class citizens. Second, their argument assumes a fixed amount of jobs. An influx of immigrants would obviously create more jobs and increase the demand for small businesses and services, especially in immigrant communities. They say that immigrants wouldn't be able to access high-skilled jobs. This argument is ridiculous. Tons of high-skilled workers enter the US every year with H-1B and EB visas. Open borders would make this process easier and allow low-skilled workers the opportunities to get higher levels of education. They propose we need to focus on reforming the system of exploitation. Earth to Sandy, that's the plan. We change the oppressive structures that are embedded within the legality of immigration. Next, they describe the violence of xenophobia and racism that's prevalent in the US today. We agree that current and future immigrants will be affected by these factors. However, the negative has not outlined a proposal to change these problems. Believe it or not, Sandy isn't Thanos. She can't snap away structural violence. However, open borders will stop the mass exploitation of both documented and undocumented immigrants by corporations and the state. As Amanda said beautifully in her speech, corporations exploit the lack of legal protections for immigrant workers, subjecting them to violent and unfair working conditions. Additionally, the vast number of violent acts committed against immigrants happen on the border by DHS, ICE, and border security agents. Immigration is inevitable. Folks are still going to try to obtain visas or immigrate illegally if open borders doesn't pass. However, only the affirmative has outlined a concrete method to ensure that the rights of immigrants entering the country are protected. Thank you.
While the affirmative has made many poignant arguments in favor of an open borders policy, they still don't acknowledge both the economic and social harms that immigrants will face if they come to America. They say they don't have to prove that America is perfect in order to say that open borders is a good idea, but don't realize that not only will it make the economy worse, but will also expose immigrants to a cycle of violence that needs to be broken. We need to focus on making America a safe and better place for immigrants before allowing for this continuation of this cycle of xenophobia, racism, and oppression. First, we've proven that even a 10% decrease or a 10% increase in immigration would lead to a 3% decrease in wages. If opening the border is such a good idea and a substantial amount of immigrants will come in after opening the borders, then imagine how dramatically this could depress wages. Not only will open borders lead to lower wages, but will also stifle economic growth due to a decrease in demand for goods and services. If your wages were cut, your disposable income goes down. Sorry, Simon, that's just how the economy works. Second, we've discussed how any economic benefit due to immigration won't actually be felt by immigrants. Even though our opponents claim to help immigrants, it only helps the native-born citizens and the rich. Even with college degrees, immigrants disproportionately work low-skilled jobs. Our opponents naively assume that this disparity comes from lack of access rather than discrimination. In addition, they get paid far less than their citizen counterparts. This proves that open borders won't financially help immigrants. Finally, we have shown that once they arrive in America, immigrants face discrimination that leads to lasting social problems. They become culturally isolated due to discrimination and racial violence. We need to break the status quo and strive to achieve a better standard of living for immigrants before supercharging this racist system. Judges, you are morally obligated to focus on the ways we can improve the current system rather than just throwing it away. Immigrants shouldn't be subjected to prejudice, violence, and unfair treatment on the basis of race, nationality, or religion. We need to try and sustain economic growth we have rather than suppress wages. We need to work on the flaws in America before we can open the borders. We need to break the cycle of violence rather than put fuel on the fire. Thank you.
You guys study a lot? Thought so. All right. I like to learn a lot, and then, we should have opened up with, it's okay to like unleash sick burn if it's funny. It has facts and information behind it, so I really like that. Like informed name calling is cool. I'm gonna vote for supply and demand, though. That was. I'm telling you, I'm still paying for college, that's just a thing. But if my econ professor would have explained it using supply and demand, things would have gone much better for me. And I became a journalism major, so I was like, demand this. Anyway, enough about me. You guys did great, congratulations. The hard part's over. Special kudos to you also, Haley, for just throwing it on the judges that they now have a moral obligation. That was classic Minnesota right there. This is the fun part where I get to ask you questions, because it's really all I actually know how to do. And one of the things that occurred to me, and you could choose who goes, you all seem like really nice and polite people, so you're not going to jump all over each other, like politicians do in interviews and debates. This subject is in the media at an alarming pace. And depending on which media you're looking at any given time, it can kind of come with a bent or an angle or an urgency or an accusation. So I'm curious, did you ingest any current media while you were looking into this topic, or did you stay far away from it and just get to the research? I hope it does.
Well, we have to. You have to keep up to date. Having the most recent evidence is always preferable, and so you always have to be reading the news every single day to learn about what's happening in the world when it comes to a topic like this.
Sure. Was it difficult to manage, what was in the media? Because sometimes, again, that information can be different depending on the media you use. Like, maybe Facebook.
I think the good thing about debate is that you can kind of choose what you talk about, and so sometimes you just sit down and you choose to be optimistic and look at media that is optimistic and hopeful, and that's kind of the best productive form of self-care that I do in this in this activity.
Why do you think I opt to interview children every day? Because I'm like, this is better. You guys discuss immigration. See what y'all say. Speaking of debate, and again, all jokes aside, kind of what drew you to it? How do you get into the debate game? Simon, why don't you go?
College apps. So I saw a flyer on a wall when I was a freshman for debate, and I was like, that probably looks good in apps. I'll give it a shot. And then I sold my soul to it. So that's why I'm here.
That was a painfully honest answer, Simon. And I don't know if you've kept up with recent news, but your parents could have paid millions of dollars for someone to take your test. And all of this, you could have just played video games. It'd be fine. So, joke's on you, Simon.
Yeah, get on that, parents.
What is, for a topic like immigration, what would you say was, you know, if you get assigned the side that you don't necessarily believe in your heart, is that difficult? Tell me how you go through that process.
Yeah, I can answer. So what's really nice about debate is you do have a lot of freedom. Like no side is so constrained that you're really saying something that you truly disagree with. There's always an angle that you can say that makes sense, that you can follow, that you believe in. And that's what's really nice about debate, actually.
How do you handle it if one of your debate opponents, you know, maybe calls you supply and demand? How do you not get mad and, you know, just tweet out, yeah, I'm a stable genius?
You beat them.
Yeah. You win.
You what?
You beat them.
You beat them.
Yeah.
That's good.
You win the
mean
round.
like in the game?
Yeah, you win the round.
Okay,
Oh, you don't
cool.
physically beat
It's
them.
like
No, you
physical.
win the round.
Weird. If you had a dream topic, or one that you just think would be fun to debate, Simon has one.
No, I don't.
Okay, sorry, you're just like, when is this over? This lady's crazy. What would you like to debate? What would be fun?
Well, okay, this is kind of a cop-out answer because my dream topic was last year's topic, which was education, because that's what I'm passionate about, and that's like what I want to do. So that was the dream topic, and now everything's downhill.
Wow. So last year's event was super inspiring, and yeah, now I feel sad. But tell me what you want to do in education.
I want to be like a Spanish/ethnic studies teacher, and then also go into like educational justice. I don't know. It's kind of just see where it takes me.
Yeah, same. We'll figure all that out. Will you? How do you take debate skills out into the world? Or so, you know, I don't know if you've noticed, but in 2019, our population doesn't do very well with civil discourse. Just talking about issues that we may not agree on politically or personally, and how would you advise the masses to listen to both sides or all 7 sides of something?
I think it's really important that everyone be informed on the topic they're debating about. Especially like with debate, you have to be for and against of every single topic, and you have to know like what's the evidence for my opposing side, how can I beat this evidence, like really try and use like actual fact and actual critical thinking when making decisions about the world.
I can add really briefly, Simon made a great point the other day, which was debate against each other, not over each other, which I thought was very powerful and very true.
Simon agrees that that was very powerful. Are you all still debating over there? Yeah, definitely they're all still debating over there. What? No, you're not even interacting with the group there, Carter, and I mean, it gives me great pause about the future of St. Paul. Thought there was collaboration was on your website. Were you nervous to do this? Were you nervous? No?
I don't know, like, once you debate enough, you just sort of like zone out of everything except for what you're
You
doing.
can't see all those people?
I mean, I can right now, but
Okay, good.
like when you're speaking, it's just sort of like poof.
Yeah, to do debate, you have to have a certain level of not being afraid to talk in front of people. By the time you get to be varsity debaters, you're numb to the feeling of stage fright, I guess.
Yeah.
Wow. Another reason I should have done debate. See, I don't face them. It makes it so much easier. Anyone going into politics? Whoa. Tapping out. All right, well, lawyers? Educators? Simon, how about you?
I have no idea.
Cool. I like that. I like that. Embrace that. You ready? Oh, she's scared. All right, audience, it is your turn to decide which team was more persuasive, although I think we can agree they all did pretty tremendous work. On your... you've already done this, and it seems like, again, I missed saying this earlier, you have instructions on your table to vote with Kiwi Live and submit your vote. It teaches you how to do that. And judges, I think, am I doing this right? Amy Bergquist, let's start with you. You have 3 to 5 minutes to respond to what you saw.
All right, so we're going to be brief because we have limited time, but the judging panel up here found our decision very difficult, and our ultimate decision was a split decision by the panel on a 3-2 vote, so every vote matters. And what I'll do, first of all, is turn the floor over for comments to the 2 judges who were in the minority, to give them the first chance to explain a little bit about their impressions and why they voted the way they did, if they like, and we'll go to John first.
Thank you very much. Amanda, Simon, Haley, Sandy, just tremendous job. I think speaking on behalf of the entire room, we're all just humbled to be in your space here today. So again, congrats to all of you for your leadership and just demonstrating such professionalism here today. I thought everything was going to be over when I heard Haley went to Central. Figured that that was going to be a lock for Mayor Carter. You know, 2 Central grads. Oh, forgive me. You know, it was a really, really intense subject matter, and at the end of the day, it came down to just a split-hair decision for me. I thought the negative team won out just a little bit more on use of evidence as well as oratorical delivery, just by a split hair. I mean, all 4 of you were just dynamic today, and I again want to thank you both, or all 4 of you, for coming out here today. Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor Fry, is also in the minority on the vote today.
So, as you can imagine, we had a really, really tough time. Mayor Carter and I were talking throughout saying, I just don't know how I can possibly dock either team. Oftentimes, we're looking and jotting down the good things. The truth is that we were trying to find negative pieces and really couldn't. The only bits of wisdom we could offer were, slow down a little bit, just to make sure that we're retaining all of these extraordinary sound bites that you're putting out there. And then when you're finished confidently. So, you don't need to say, and I'm done now. Just say thank you, and you sit down. Those are the only 2 bits of feedback that I can give. What I can say that I liked about what the positive side did is they talked about the wasted labor potential a whole lot. They talked about having this obligation to society to do the right thing for our entire world, and part of that is opening the borders. The negative side, what you did a great job is basically saying, hey, let's be realists here. You guys are operating in the clouds right now, and first we need to take care of our own house before we start determining that house is good for other people. And I thought that was very persuasive. Really excellent job by both teams. Can't tell you how impressed I am.
Thank you. And now we'll turn it over to the judges who voted with the majority of the 3-2 decision, voting in favor of the affirmative. And we'll go now to Mayor Carter, please.
Fantastic. First, I'll just reiterate what Mayor Fry said. I mean, an incredible job by all of you. It was just really, really fun to listen to. Wouldn't you guys agree this was just really fun to listen to? You guys made it enjoyable. You guys made the morning kind of really fantastic. I think in general, I think all of you outlined your arguments well. That's really helpful. And you stood up and said, first I'm going to talk about this, and then I'm going to talk about this. And then you actually did that. Those 2 don't always go together. You all used quotes and statistics really well, and then repeated those quotes to really hammer them home. I've learned this morning that a 10% increase in the population creates a what percent decrease in wages? We've learned some of these things because you guys hammered those home kind of really, really well.
I learned today that smart people do, in fact, go to Central. That's... Joking, he's the smartest guy in the room.
Not at all. Great use of repetition. I loved the not just your oratorical delivery, because I often feel like giving a speech and having a conversation are two different things. I thought you guys were conversational and comfortable, and I appreciated that. Particularly enjoyed the kind of back and forth, the rebuttal questions. That was a lot of fun. I gave the tiebreaker to the affirmative team, frankly not because I could find ways to dock points from the negative team, but because I felt that all of you kind of did a really good job sort of rebutting the arguments, and it felt to me as though the argument of the affirmative still stood at the end of the day.
Okay, next we'll turn to Liz for comments.
Thank you. I mean, I don't think we can say enough about how wonderful that this debate was, how articulate you all were. I worked with a lot of lawyers over a lot of years, and I could see you talking with any one of them and sounding articulate and thoughtful, and I really appreciated the clear work you put into this as well. It was also very close for me, and I thought that you, one of the things I noticed most about all of you actually was that when you were speaking, you made us want to listen to you. You had just a presence about you, and you were nice. When you and your burns to each other were in a way that wasn't like you were being nasty. You were still having a discourse, and I thought that was a lot of fun, and it made it so we all felt like you were friends and getting along, as opposed to taking the joy out of it if people felt like they were attacking each other. So just well done all the way around on that. Your arguments were very strong. Your support was good. I think what ultimately caused me to vote for the affirmative was I felt like, first of all, I thought the closing arguments were particularly strong. And the argument that we can sort of do both, we can fix and open the borders, was, I think, what carried the day for me. Now, I understand there's some debate about which one you should do first, but in the end of the day, that's how I ended up making my decision. So well done to all of you.
Thanks, and I guess I gave myself the last word, not intentionally, but so I was really impressed also with the quality of the debate, especially, it's a challenge for debaters who are used to debating in front of, quasi-professional judges who are used to a lot of the rhetoric, to adapt to their audience, to people who are maybe seeing their first academic debate ever, and on a topic they're not familiar with. So I think the debaters did an excellent job of adapting to their audience and making a complex topic digestible while you're all digesting your breakfast. In terms of my rationale for voting affirmative, I think we did on the top of economics. I think the affirmative did a better job of explaining the context of the current labor shortage, and it wasn't clear to me, although maybe it was clear in the evidence that the negative presented, that the wage drop that evidence assumed the current labor shortage and the imminent, perhaps, recession, rather than just being a general statistic that the negatives were offering. And so I thought the affirmative's argument was a bit more specific on that point. I also, with respect to the issues of violence and discrimination, I think the affirmative had the better argument specifically with respect to the violence involved with border crossings. We know that human trafficking is an issue that happens at the borders, and if you have open borders, there's a far decreased incentive for human trafficking across the border, and that to me showed that the affirmative had the potential to at least mitigate some of the violence faced by border crossers. I think the negative had a really strong argument that they could have made more fruit out of with respect to what would happen if we had an open borders policy, and how it could have the potential to spike violence and discrimination targeting all immigrants in the current political climate. So this sort of social panic that our society could face in the current climate, if there were all of a sudden open borders, that there would be a lot of backlash against anyone who is suspected of being an immigrant, and that could actually escalate the violence and discrimination. I think there was, that argument was made, but could have been expanded upon a bit more to tip the argument in their favor. But all in all, I think it was a very strong debate, raising really important issues in the context of immigration. I was glad also to hear the affirmative carry through with the argument with respect to undocumented workers. And this is a very important issue, that undocumented workers are far more vulnerable to exploitation and violence and abuse, and don't have recourse. And that's part of the experience that experts in the field talk about, and that by having an open borders program, you do reduce that danger of violence and discrimination in the workplace. So I felt like the affirmative proposal did have a heightened probability for solving or at least reducing the harms from those factors. So with that, it looks like we have 1 minute left for the judges panel's feedback, so I'll open it up to any other panelists who have anything further to share. All right, thanks very much.
Thanks
and
for
thanks
that
to the
minute.
panelists.
I'm gonna, whoo! Well, students, as we told you, the audience got to vote as well, and the results are in. You won the popular vote, but not the Electoral College. Just kidding. Politics jokes are funny. The affirmative, Amanda and Simon, you had 62 votes. The negative, Haley and Sandy, 35 votes. The audience hath spoken. I personally want to thank you for solving the immigration crisis. Great job. You know, I'm not working today, but I feel like I should go do a story on that you solved this. We should tell someone. All right, enough of my bad jokes. I know, it's hard. I don't have any friends. We're going to move on. And Amy Cram-Helwick, the Executive Director of the Minnesota Urban Debate League, will be speaking to us next. She is a former high school and college debater with over 15 years of nonprofit management experience, 10 with the Urban Debate League here in Minnesota. Amy believes strongly in the transformative power of debate, and she will join us for the last portion of the program.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Well, thank you, Jana, and thank you to our students and to our panelists. Can we just have one more round of applause? Before we begin the last part of our program, I'd like to take a moment and recognize all of our staff and board who truly did all of the hard work to make sure that our event is so successful and brought all of you here to our campus today. Could I have our staff and advisory board members stand and be recognized, please? So now we're going to move to our part of our program where we get to think about how we take academic debate and embody our mission to take that change out into the community. For the second year, the Minnesota Urban Debate League would like to recognize leaders who embody our mission to advocate change in our communities. And to give out our Champion of Change Award, I'd like to introduce Nevada Littlewolf, who's a new board member to the Minnesota Urban Debate League. In addition to being a former high school debater, Nevada is a change agent and a community leader, from a Bush Fellowship to multiple leadership positions in the Minnesota philanthropy community. Please join me in welcoming Nevada.
Good morning. I'm very honored to be introducing our honoree. She has been a humble teacher, my mentor, my friend, my clan sister, and my sister in the fight for justice. Minnesota Urban Debate League seeks to empower students through competitive academic debate. We are growing engaged leaders, critical thinkers, and active global citizens who are effective advocates for themselves and their communities. Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan has been a strong advocate for children and youth throughout her entire life and her whole public service career. She's been a school board member for the Minneapolis Public Schools. She's been the executive director of the Children's Defense Fund. She's been a state representative in the legislature, and now she's our lieutenant governor. Our students see her as a role model. They take what they learned from the classroom and they're putting it into action as advocates and change agents. And we're all very lucky to have Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan as a role model in that way as well. The Champion of Change Award recognizes Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan's work as a catalyst for change in our communities through advancement of effective policy, a more engaged community, and breaking barriers. She's fearless and authentic leader, and our community is grateful for her. Please help me welcome our champion of change, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan.
Good morning. Oh my goodness. Hello, Mr. Redmond. I may be talking about you in this speech. My high school speech coach is here. Well, thank you so much for this incredible honor. It is really wonderful to be here, and it is really powerful to be introduced by Nevada Little Wolf, who is, as all of the things that she mentioned, we are sisters, but I admire her so much. So thank you, and also a shout out to the First Lady who is here in the audience, Gwen Walls. We work very closely together on issues that affect young people across our state, and I am grateful for her leadership. So I still pinch myself when I realize that I'm Lieutenant Governor, and sometimes I wake up and I'm like, all right, this is your job. This again, okay, here we go. And it is a real honor. But the last couple of weeks, I've been pinching myself to stay awake after we had a really long legislative session. And we are also fueled by sugar. So that should give you confidence in your state government. But the many times that I realized I was in a room where big decisions were being made. I was at the table where decisions were being made. And there really hadn't been anyone who looked like me at that table before. Every person who'd ever been elected to statewide office in Minnesota has been white. Until last year, when Keith Ellison was elected Attorney General and I was elected Lieutenant Governor. People of color and indigenous folks like me haven't really gotten to make those decisions before at that table, to be in those rooms. Those decisions were made to our communities, but not with our communities. And a little bit of that, just a little bit, changed this year. Now, we didn't get everything that we wanted, but even in divided government, I think we did more for communities and for our children and families than a budget has done in a very long time. When I was little, I grew up in the community of St. Louis Park, the community that I represented in the legislature and the community where I still live. And we didn't have a lot. My mom moved us there when I was just a baby using a Section 8 housing voucher. We relied on programs like the Child Care Assistance Program, SNAP, which back in the day we called food stamps. I was that kid with the different colored lunch ticket and my little Roo zip-up tennis shoe. You remember those, the Velcro with the zipper on the side? Yeah, those were really high fashion. And we went to a lot of doctor's visits, and I was hospitalized quite a bit with asthma, and my family relied on Medicaid. But the program that was really important to my family was a program that we used to call welfare. In Minnesota, now it's called MFIP, the Minnesota Family Investment Program. And it's just a few $100s a month to help families raise their kids and meet their basic needs. It doesn't pay for everything, but it usually helps with a few bills and maybe some groceries, and those things matter. Well, guess what? MFIP hadn't had an increase since I was 6 years old, a first grader, in Mrs. Hollenbeck's class. And that was a long time ago, 33 years. And I think about how much more expensive things are today than when I was in first grade. And this year, in that budget that I just talked about, that kept me awake for those first all-nighters, well, we increased the MFIP cash assistance for needy families by $100 a month. And that matters. Now, Now listen, I know $100 isn't gonna solve everyone's problem overnight, but it's a week worth of groceries for a family, and that matters. I bring that up to you first because I'm very proud of it. Politicians like to talk a lot about the middle class, but we do not often talk about folks who are living on the margins and people who live in poverty, and it matters. But here's a little secret. A lot of times when we talk about these issues, we talk about them as if they are other people. And I can't talk about things that way. I was that kid who relied on those programs, and it matters that we have people who are directly affected by public policy, that they have to have a seat at the table, which is why urban debate matters. And it is why all of you matter. Your experience and your expertise is going to propel you into the future, so that when you are at decision-making tables, because you will be, I'm gonna hold the door open, because that's my job. And so is Melvin, and so is Mayor Fry. We're gonna hold those doors open because we need you at those tables, bringing your own perspective and expertise into the debate, into the conversation, and ultimately as decision makers. A few weeks ago, there was a state track meet for high schoolers in Washington State. And one of the runners is a senior named Rosalie Fish. How many of y'all have heard about Rosalie Fish? All right. And a woo outside in the hallway. I love it. All right. She's a member of the Cowlitz Indian tribe, and she ran her events with a large red handprint printed across her mouth and face. Like this. And think of that hand, that hand symbolizes someone grabbing someone from behind and silencing them as they're being attacked. And it's a pretty jarring sight. On her legs, she painted the letters MMIW, and that stands for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. And she won. And Rosalie is now state champion, but she was also running to raise awareness of an epidemic in this country, of Native American women going missing and being murdered at rates much higher than any other race or ethnicity. Too often, Native women, at best, are invisible, and at worst, are disposable. I've never met Rosalie, but I am proud of her, because she did what each of you can do today. Something small to raise awareness about something important to you. And it usually starts small. The key is that when it comes to advocating and being a catalyst of change for your community, your identity, your voice, and your values, your experience, that's your North Star. They matter, and you matter. What you think and what you have to say is needed in this world. Like all those moms who came to the Capitol and advocated for their babies for the increase in MFIP. But here's the thing. The world can turn that North Star around and say that your identity and your voice and your values aren't worth much. If you hear nothing else from me today, hear this. You must not allow yourself to erase or shrink yourself. There are plenty of people in this world who are going to do that for you. Do not do it to yourself. One of my Rosalie Fish moments was in high school, when I did what Peter Redmond suggested I do. Take his speech class and join the speech team as an underclassman. On the seating chart, he sat me in the front row in the middle of the room. I was used to being that chubby Ojibwe kid who sat in the back and tried to shrink herself, to make myself smaller. It's not a coincidence that Peter Redmond was the only teacher of color in my high school. One small thing. And that changed my life because it started giving me confidence. And I got to hear it from another person of color who was at the head of the classroom, that I was seen, that I was heard, that I was valued, that my voice mattered. And it wasn't as bold as what Rosalie Fish did, but I walked into that classroom as a shy Indian kid who didn't want to be seen. And I left as someone starting to value my worth in this world, and I started to use my voice to draw people in, to make people laugh, to make them listen. And all those years later, Peter Redmond still comes to events of mine. And I think about him every single time I give a speech. I'm standing here because of you, Peter Redmond. Thank you. And you want to know what else we did at the Capitol this year? We passed a bill that will set up a way to study and keep track of the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women with bipartisan support. And part of the issue about missing and murdered Indigenous women is that we don't fully understand how bad it is. We need to study it, and we need people like Rosalie Fish advocating for it. And we need people who are in office to realize it's important. And once we finally did that in Minnesota, we can get on to solving the problem. And it happened because people listened. The voices of our mothers and our grandmothers and our sisters and our aunties and best friends were centered and lifted up. It was powerful and it was persuasive. They made their case, and people with decision-making power heard them. Their voices changed everything, just as your voices can change everything. These women refuse to be invisible, and that's what you have to do too. Refuse to be invisible. For me, being a champion of change is an honor, but it's also a responsibility. I'm now in a position where I can help get that missing and murdered Indigenous Women's Task Force bill passed. I can help children and families like mine with that monthly MFIP assistance. But we must do more. Now that I'm the first Native woman to hold the highest executive office in the United States, as I mentioned before, my job is to hold the door open so that all of you can come in. I know how much you've worked to be here on this stage, and also how much this will prepare you for everything that you do from this moment on. You might not come through that door that's held open today or tomorrow or even next year, but I promise that I'll be there, and people who follow me will be there, waiting for you and encouraging you and making sure that when you start to shrink, we encourage you to stand up straight, to blossom, and to be seen, heard, and valued. So nothing you do is too small if you believe in it. Rosalie Fish put paint on her face, and she ran as fast as she could. I took a chance and walked into that classroom I never thought that I should be in. So what will you do? I cannot wait. Chimigwech, thank you so much for this incredible honor.
Thank you again, Lieutenant Governor. That was incredibly moving and inspiring. And I'd like to introduce another incredibly moving and inspiring person, someone who inspires me. We would not be here today at all without her vision and persistence, and that's our founder, Karen Guerin. I want to introduce Karen and for everyone to hear a little bit about our history and about how one person, which is beautifully set up by Lieutenant Governor, how one person can really start a movement. Karen?
Wow, what a morning. I know you've been here a while, so I promise to share the cliff notes of how the Minnesota Urban League began. Chapter 1, the story opens with Rick Kahn's call to action at Paul Wellstone's memorial. He said, "It is not enough to have a good heart filled with compassion if we are unwilling to act on that compassion. It is not enough to believe in justice if we are unwilling to fight for true justice whenever it is threatened." The truth of these words challenged me to make a difference. Chapter 2, flashback to my years as a single mom raising 4 sons, all of whom were debaters. And yes, I live to tell the tale. The gray hair is a result. In reality, debate is a remarkable partner in parenting for aspiring F. Lee Baileys. Research, practice, and tournaments kept them much too busy to get into trouble. And they quickly learned that not everything is debatable. As teenagers, debate gave my sons a place to belong, a community where they were affirmed, empowered, and respected. They learned the importance of using information with integrity and to distinguish between questionable, biased sources and the truth. Debate taught them that losing is a springboard for action, not defeat. Their debate partners and competitors alike became lifelong friends, and to this day they share an extraordinary bond. I was dismayed to discover that debate, this once vibrant pillar of democracy and a rite of passage, had virtually disappeared from the urban public schools. To me, this was an injustice, both to students and to our communities. Chapter 3, one day during a phone conversation, I experienced an irresistible fire-in-the-belly moment that just said yes. In that instant, I knew that I would be mounting a crusade to bring debate back to the Twin Cities public schools. When I shared this vision with my son's longtime debate coach, Greg Fishbein, he shared a reality check. Others had tried this in the past and failed. Something in my voice must have told Greg that come hell or high water, I was determined to succeed, because that very day he introduced me to Matt Intenza, then the minority leader of the Minnesota House. Matt sent letters of introduction to other former debaters, and I was off and running. Trust me, not every day was a great day, and the challenges were enormous. In my naive enthusiasm, I decided to start programs where the greatest need existed, schools like North and Harding. Recruiting students who had never heard of debate was a study in the power of pizza and persuasion. Try telling teenagers that getting up at the crack of dawn on a Saturday morning is fun. I was never sure that the buses would run on time, if at all, and it was really a challenge to persuade funders unfamiliar with the academic rigors of debate that these were not the pseudo-debates of presidential politics or a training ground for the Jerry Springer Show. And yet somehow, thanks to many of you who are here today, it worked. Recently, a former urban debater thanked me in person. The son of a migrant farmer, he said he debated in tennis shoes and t-shirts, but when he realized that he could beat debaters in suits and ties, it changed the way he saw himself and his future. Tyler Morelos not only graduated from college, he went on to get a master's in public policy from Columbia University. His story is now one of many. As I look out at this audience, I am in awe of how far we've come. Amy, Bob Groven, the board of directors, and Augsburg University have taken a fledgling organization and turned it into a force to be reckoned with. Please join me in supporting them in making a difference. Thank you.
So now that you know a little bit of our history, I would like to invite you to invest in our future. What started with one school and 4 students is now a program serving over 1,000 students in 40 schools. Wait, can we pause there for a moment? In case you haven't heard, we blasted through our goal and we're now serving 1,000 students. And we did it ahead of schedule. We did it by including innovative programming, such as our Spanish debates and our East African debate, as well as our newly launched financial literacy leadership debates. How does this change happen? It was the vision and persistence of Karen in our early days, along with founding board members. It was the leadership of Augsburg University who brought us on, giving us not only our home, but scholarships for our students. It was the students writing letters to Minneapolis and St. Paul district leadership asking for funding and support, and the districts deciding to invest. And it was philanthropic support from foundations and individuals who helped us begin our story, and more importantly, continue it. We're excited to announce that this year, for the very first time, we are recipients of funding from the Greater Twin Cities United Way. With this support, $150,000 over 3 years, we will be able to serve even more schools and more students. Can you please join me in thanking the United Way? I am also extremely excited to announce that we have created a plan for the long term. I can think of no better way to honor Karen's vision than to announce that her 4 sons, including Adam Guerin, who's here, have come together with a generous gift from George Dow and Bonnie Hill to inaugurate our Founders Fund as a part of our new endowment campaign. We'd like your help to ensure that Karen's vision lives long into the future. You'll find a pledge card on your table. Please take a moment. It's underneath the newsletters and the program on your table. And if you could take a moment to fill it out now. And as you are doing that, I'd like to invite Karen back to the stage. We have a plaque in her honor to thank her for her vision and her persistence. Almost 15 years ago, she created the idea that brought us here today. Karen? gifts empower thousands of critical thinking change agents for our community. Together, we will change the world. Thank you for being here this morning. And with that, I'll ask Jana to come to the back and close out our program. Thank you again.
It's really pointless. I just tell you to leave. Crack bad jokes. Thanks all of you for your generous donations. Thanks for coming and supporting these students this year and every year. Karen, thank you for having that fire in your belly all of those years ago. Mr. Redmond, thank you for being an incredible teacher. Sorry, I can't look at teachers without crying. Lieutenant Governor Flanagan, thank you for sitting in front of that class. Thank you all for being here. Have a great day.